Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, December 17th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Tennessee game is in 4 days. The game against Michigan in 347 days. Having our buddy Ross Fulton back on the show, the X's and O's guru at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And when we have Ross on the show, we're sponsored by Jeff Ruby's of Columbus, proudly offering nationally acclaimed USDA prime steak, seafood and sushi, impeccable service, live entertainment, and an attention to detail that is simply unmatched. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus today to check out the menu and make a reservation today. All right. So this is going to be a little different than a lot of our typical Raw shows. We're not going to be breaking down a bunch of video on this one. This is more of kind of a high-level look at the Tennessee defense. Tony Gerderman and I have done a rewatch on 4 of the games that Tennessee played this year, 4 of their biggest games. So we've got a pretty good sense for personnel and just how different guys do in different situations. Today, I want to take a little bit more of a schematic look at the Tennessee defense. So Ross, let's just start real high level here. Tim Banks, defensive coordinator for Tennessee, obviously a very respected and very effective coach. What's his background? What does he like to do?
Yeah, so he was, prior to Tennessee, he was the co-defensive coordinator, I believe was his official title at Penn State. He was there with Brett Pry, and so you see a lot of those Penn State roots that are going to be familiar to a lot of people, and obviously Ryan Day has had a lot of experience going against the framework of the Penn State scheme through different coordinators. But, Brett Pry, principally, it's a 4 down front. You will see Tennessee mix in occasionally an odd front, but really 4 down. They want to play a lot of single high coverage. I think that I would say that that's sort of what they major in. So you'll see both cover 1 and cover 3 match, which we've talked about, where you're playing cover 3, but you're covering a lot of routes within your zone. And so it looks very similar to cover 1. It's a pretty aggressive cover 3. They will mix in some, quarter, half, which we've talked about, cover 4 to one side, cover 2 to the short side, or cover 4. But I would say they're more basic in doing those kind of split safety looks because it's not like their bread and butter. It's more of a change up for them. So it's a lot more of sort of zone it off. We've talked about that in the context of Jim Knowles and Ohio State. But so as I said, I think the default is get that 7th, 8th guy in the box, play single gap everything out, play, a lot of single high. I think they, will do that to their benefit or detriment. I think, I know you and Tony have broken down the Georgia game. I think that's an example where it really hurt them. They wanted to be super aggressive on Georgia, and get a lot of single high, and I think they got hurt in the passing game, with a lot of play action, targeting, Georgia targeted their tight end. I think we can talk about that, but it has some implications for particularly the use of Emeka Egbuka.
And when you face a team like that, they talked on a bunch of the broadcasts, multiple of the broadcasts, how Tennessee loves to just put their corners out on an island and just, like you said, get a bunch of guys in the box. You wonder if that game plan changes. How easy is it, if that's kind of your base and that's your bread and butter, how easy and how comfortable are coaches with saying, okay, that's great against Vanderbilt or that's great against Kentucky, but when you're playing the Ohio State wide receiver core, which is probably better than any wide receiver core they've played this year. They've played talented teams. Alabama has talented wide receivers, Ryan Williams in particular, and Georgia has big name wide receivers who sometimes catch the football. But, how comfortable are coaches generally with getting away from something like that they want to do? Is that something that you're expecting to see and now for something completely different? Or is this going to be Tennessee may do this and see if Ohio State's wide receivers can beat them?
Yeah, I think it's easier said than done. I think for the reasons I just laid out, there's only so much practice time available, and you are who you are. There's obviously edges to that. But as I said, when you see Tennessee and they do mix in variety, right? So I don't want to give the impression that they don't and everything's just cover 1 every play. But it's, as I said, it's a little bit more basic when they run it. I think you get kind of a couple concepts. So let's just compare it to Michigan, for instance, who has been through the McDonald Minter Wink Martindale years, like a lot of different types of split safety concepts, like they mix in a lot of that trap two and things like that. Like, I don't think, Tennessee just has that volume of split safety stuff, so that when you do get it, you're going to be somewhat basic in it and how you do it. And it just, again, kind of goes against, you have to, yes, you see what works on film, but like you have to make it work within what you do, right? So like I know, Brent Rollins, who's like a great Georgia X's and O's guy, discussing with him, he said when they played Georgia, for instance, he was pretty shocked by how much single high 8-man boxes Tennessee gave them, because the week before that, Georgia really struggled against Ole Miss, playing a lot of like soft cover two and split safety zones. And he expected a lot of that from Tennessee, and they didn't do that. Now, maybe they've learned, and maybe they'll try to take a page from the Michigan playbook. But I would just expect it to be, this is the same thing applies to Penn State, right? Like, who's played Ohio State every year. And yes, you get some cover two mixed in there. And again, like, there's different iterations of Penn State coaches, but I think you can say they've had a general framework since James Franklin's been there on defense. But, you still get, particularly like on standard downs, a lot of cover three mixed with cover one. And because it's just their framework, right? And so there's different things you can do in single high, obviously. But I just think you can only change your stripes so much.
All right. So let's say Ohio State gets a bunch of cover three mixed with cover one in standard down. So what is offensive coordinator Ross Fulton going to do if he thinks that that's what he's going to get?
I'm going to throw the football early and often. I think, obviously no one wants to see a replay of what Ohio State did against Michigan. And I think obviously it's a little different, right? Because as we talked about after that game, Ryan Day and Chip Kelly, like sort of their overall framework is like, if you're getting too high coverages, you're going to try to run the football against that, because you should have decent numbers. And obviously that was not working against Michigan because they just couldn't block it. So single high, you're much more apt to throw. I also think that Will Howard has been better against single high coverages, just in terms of diagnosing and sort of picking out some of the intricacies of what he's been seeing with split safeties, particular teams, again, as I said, that mix in a lot of variety there and how they run, two high safeties or cover four. So I think that's my first thing. I think you got to do a lot of quick game, a lot of RPOs. Like, it depends, again, how Tennessee's playing their single highs. And, you said leaving on islands, leaving corners on an island, like a lot of things you will see that I have been wishing Ohio State would do for much of this year is teams like Alabama and Georgia did this. If they saw single coverage out wide, they basically would, it's effectively a relief, right? It's not even RPO. Like, you're just, the quarterback's pulling it right away off the run play and throwing a fade route out wide. Would love to see them do that to Jeremiah Smith, obviously, if he's singled up. Conversely, if there's giving, it's cover three, they're giving some cushion, then you want to hit those like quick hitch and out route RPOs. The other thing I would say is, if they're doing that, I really think they need to involve Will Howard more in the run game. Like, it can't just be the sporadic base zone read with a lead arc block to the tight end. Like, if you're going to get single eye coverage, like they did against Penn State, run that pause speed option until like someone actually holds it for under 10 yards a carry. Like, that would be nice to see them do that, especially like if you're singled up to Jeremiah Smith's side and that corner's following him vertically, like there's not the support. Stuff like they showed earlier this year, as I said, like run a gap scheme to Will Howard one way with Bash the other way, meaning like the back's on a sweep opposite the blocking. So then you're both, you're creating variety. You're giving the linebackers more things to look at. And then you're also getting the running back outside in space away from the blocking, like try to get Quinshon Judkins and Trayvon Henderson some room to work with. But I think it's got to be a lot of that, right? Like, I think no one could rightly or in their right minds think that like the good matchup here is Ohio State's offensive line against Tennessee's defensive line, right? Like that's the strength of Tennessee's team. Obviously like James Pierce gets a lot of focus. He's really good. I think their defensive tackles are pretty good too, and they're pretty deep there. So I think it's got to be a kind of air raid, a lot of quick game, like get the ball out of Will Howard's hands. Like if you're getting a bunch of man, like mesh routes, those shallow cross routes, use Jeremiah Smith on underneath stuff. And then, the final thing I would mention is, like, as I was just saying, like a lot of Emeka Egbuka, like, I think Tennessee's corners, like particularly the number one guy is pretty good. Like but I've seen teams have success against Tennessee, like Alabama, like ran an arrow route out of the backfield. You get a running back on a D end, or like a lot of stuff with the slot receiver, like those wheel routes we've showed like to Egbuka, when you're getting him manned up on a safety or even their nickel, Tennessee does like to respond to 12 personnel, 2 tight ends with a 4-3. That should sound familiar. You use that to your advantage, get them in a 4-3, take out their slot corner and get some advantageous matchups that way. So it's got to be a plan where you are not, I'm not saying anything revolutionary here, but you're not banging your head against the wall, and you're figuring out the way to run the football with getting numbers and getting the ball in space and getting the ball out of Will Howard's hand quickly, early and often.
So McCoy, who's their best corner, at least in my mind, number 3. You mentioned Ricky Gibson, number 1. He's the guy on the opposite side. My assumption all along has been they probably just have McCoy follow Jeremiah Smith to a certain degree. Is that what you're expecting? Do they, or do they kind of mix and match? Because it's not like Ohio State has one guy. It's not Alabama where it's like just cover Ryan Williams and they're going to throw him the ball literally 19 times in this game. So, with a more diverse passing game that Ohio State has, a more diverse passing game threat that Ohio State has, how do you see that divided up? And is it McCoy's on one side, and if you got Gibson on him, you maybe need to try and we've seen plenty of teams try and bracket Jeremiah Smith all year. Is that how would you defend that if you're Tennessee?
Yeah, I was going to say, I haven't seen teams really play much single coverage on Jeremiah Smith the second half of the season in general. I have seen Tennessee, like they'll cheat a safety over to one side or roll him. Again, I think it's incumbent upon like Chip Kelly and Ryan Day. They need to do a better job of moving Jeremiah Smith around. And as I said, like not making him like always the deep option, right? Like you're going to run the deep route. Like his average depth of targets, like over 13 yards. And it doesn't need to be that way because he's really good after the catch too, right? So like hit him on hitches, hit him on those shallow crossing routes. Like I thought Ohio State, to use last year as a comparison, like had some of these same issues with Marvin Harrison earlier in the season and then did a better job like using him on like shallow crosses and a variety of routes in the second half of the year. And I think they need a similar plan to that. But then again, like, the good news, like I agree, McCoy is a very good corner. And that's why, it's time, like move Emeka Egbuka around, put him in the backfield and use him on angle routes. Split Travion Henderson out wide like they did against Purdue, who showed a bunch of man coverage, obviously, and see how Tennessee responds. So I think it's sort of one of those games where it's the base stuff isn't going to be good enough to consistently move the football, particularly in the run game. And so you can't let Tennessee take you out of, even if you want to run RPOs, like you can't let them force the football to be handed off all the time and just like sort of, throw your hands up, because I'm not sure you're going to win those matchups inside. So it's going to take more engineering on Chip Kelly's part and Ryan Day's part, as I said, with a mix of motion shifts, quick game, quarterback run game, designed runs, get the ball outside in space to your running backs, things of that nature.
You talked just a minute ago about not needing to throw the ball downfield to Jeremiah Smith every time, not always having him be the deep guy. Do they need to have someone else be the deep guy? I mean, you just talked about a whole bunch of stuff and I didn't hear you say, and throw the ball way down the field a bunch. So, is is that going to be an important thing if Tennessee's going to be aggressive to try and just hit them over the top every once in a while? And if that's part of the game plan, how much of a concern is 20-ish degrees and winds gusting up to 25 miles an hour with Will Howard's arm?
Yeah, well, if the wind's like that, then I think you need to reassess things. If that's the case, both teams are in that box a little bit. I personally, as I said, like if they really want to press up Jeremiah Smith, then I would like to see Ohio State give Will Howard the option to basically pull whatever play is being run and throw a go route to Jeremiah Smith. As I said, like Alabama had some success doing that to Ryan Williams against Tennessee. I actually would like to see them, in terms of creating explosives, attack the middle of the field to do so, particularly with Ibuka, but even the tight ends too. Like, as I said, Georgia had a lot of success. Like their Carson Beck's first touchdown route was a seam route against Tennessee. Like, you want to look for the advantageous matchups because they will play aggressively. Like, Tennessee will at times get themselves in situations where they have a linebacker on a running back or even a linebacker on a slot or tight end. And, we've seen Will Howard hit G. Scott on a route like that against Northwestern, right, over a linebacker. So against cover 2, Tampa. So I think that's, to me, I would like to see them, as I said, sort of reverse script, right? And, use Jeremiah Smith underneath and then look to hit other guys explosives where you think you have the advantageous matchup, because I do just worry that Tennessee will roll even if they're in a single high, will roll their safety towards Smith when he's pushing going deep.
All right, so there you go. We'll see if Ryan Day and Chip Kelly were taking notes. If you want to take notes, a great place to do that would be at BuckeyeHuddle.com, because we have lots of scheme talk and X's and O's talk on our board just about every day, certainly every week. And that is definitely going to be the case again this week, heading into this game against Tennessee. Boy, there's a lot to talk about. Really, really interesting matchup of two very talented teams. Like to do some different stuff, but you probably heard a lot of familiar stuff there as well in terms of Tennessee's defense and some of the ideas they have. So you've probably seen that at Ohio State a little bit the last few years as well. So plenty to talk about there. We'll be talking about all that at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And of course, on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle, we'll have much more coverage coming for you all week long there. Leading up to the kickoff on Saturday night at 8 o'clock, we'll have our usual pregame coverage. Yes, post-game coverage. Oh boy, will that be a spirited conversation one way or the other. Saturday night at about 11:30 or so at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Thanks again to Jeff Ruby's Steakhouse, the award-winning upscale steakhouse in downtown Columbus, named one of the top 50 steakhouses in America by Food Network. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus, check out the menu, and make a reservation for today. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.